The title of this module is How to Install Raspbian from OSX. And what we're going to do in this module is we're going to install Raspbian to an SD card and put that on the Raspberry Pi. Now the first thing I've done here is I'm going to download the image from the raspberrypi.org website. And the one I'm choosing is Raspbian Jessie Lite. And what this is a minimal image, and it's based on Debian Jessie, as it says. And there's no desktop or any other kind of installed programs. It's a very barebone Linux, and it's one of my favorite ones to use for IoT projects, especially if I know I'm not going to use any of the desktop or display things. It's definitely a better choice for what I happen to be doing. Now the first thing I want to do is use this SD formatter program that's available here. This program will format my SD card and wipe off anything that was on it before. So we'll click on Format. And now my card format is complete. Now you notice there are two different options here for formatting. One of them is a quick format, the other one is an overwrite format. Now the quick format, as it implies, is a faster one, and what it does is it basically sets the card as being erased, but it doesn't truly erase the data on the card. It just marks the card so that the data can be overwritten. When you do an overwrite format, what that does is it scrubs the data off of the card, making it completely empty and ready to go. Now it takes a little bit longer, and it also checks for bad blocks, so sometimes you will want to use the overwrite format. Most of the time, I just use the quick format. And then of course in option 3 you can specify the name of the card, which really doesn't matter, so I usually just put boot or Pi or something like that. Now that our card is formatted, let's get an operating system on it. Now I have on my desktop here an OSes folder, and in that folder contains the image for the Raspbian Lite. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn this image from the command prompt, so I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm at a command prompt here, and as you can see I'm at Users, Jeremy Morgan, Desktop, OSes, Raspberry Pi. And there's our Raspberry Pi image. Now the first thing I want to do is check and see which disks are mounted on my system. Now looking through the list of my drives here, I can see that I have an 8.1 gig drive there at dev disk 2. Now we're going to want to remember that, /dev/disk 2. Now the next thing I'm going to do is unmount this disk by typing in diskutil unmount disk /dev/disk 2. And now the disk has been unmounted. And now I'm going to do a direct copy of this drive over to disk 2. And I'm going to do that with the following command. Now do sudo dd and then bs equals 1m and then if, which is going to be our input file, and I'll type in 20 and a tab. That brings up my image that's here in the folder, and then for the output file I'm going to do dev disk 2 and hit enter. And this, of course, is going to ask for my password, since it's a privileged operation that we're doing. And you might want to sit tight, because this operation will take a while. Now, one thing you'll notice here with my Pi is that I have a Wi-Fi dongle plugged in, and I also have an Ethernet cable plugged in. Now, if you're going to put a new operating system on a disk, as we just did, in order to find and connect to your Raspberry Pi, you will need to either plug in an Ethernet cable, and then find it on your router, or you're going to have to plug it into a monitor. Once you plug it into a monitor, you can see your IP address, and then you can connect to the router that way, or you can get the Wi-Fi dongle configured and ready to go, and do it that way, and then communicate through SSH. But one of these things will have to be done in order for you to connect to your Raspberry Pi. In this module, I covered installing a new operating system to your Raspberry Pi by burning an image to your SD card. There's a wide variety of operating systems out there. As I'd stated, Raspbian is one of my favorites, but you can get Linux, Unix, and even Windows on your Raspberry Pi as long as you have a Raspberry Pi 2. These operating systems are easy to switch out, and SD cards are relatively cheap, so I would recommend trying a few different operating systems as you go till you find one that you like the best. And now, on to our next module.